There's a lot of topics on my list of things to get through, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while and kind of struggling with it in a lot of ways. And I think it starts best with the question of what is the highest form of worship, if there is such a thing as a highest form of worship. And in our tradition, this is a tough question because we have kind of gradations of gospel participation, where you show up and you're first called a friend, or what we used to call investigators. And then eventually you kind of grow into the gospel through various ordinances and responsibilities and different things. And if in that you move from place to place, there's the chapel, and then there's the new member classes and relief society and priesthood. And then outside the chapel, there's temple ordinances, and if you're a youth, there's youth classes and then adult classes. I think the tradition, without really thinking about it too hard, most people say that the highest form of worship is in the temple somewhere. That has to be the highest form of worship because that is where the final covenants are made, that we know of in the plan of salvation, the covenants of eternal families. And when I started thinking about that question, it really bothered me because it starts touching on something that I think we struggle with as a people. We struggle with connecting covenants with actions and behaviors. Like, what does it mean to keep a covenant? Because I'll ask people, how do you renew your temple covenant? And inevitably somebody will say, by attending the temple. And even most people listening to this will probably say, yeah, of course, that's the right answer. You renew your temple covenant by going to the temple, which is not, it's not true. It's not even close to true. You return to the temple in order to help others make covenants. We renew covenants by attending sacrament. And so then again, the question is, how do we renew those covenants? How do we keep those covenants? What is the covenant we're making? And how do we keep the covenants that we're making in the temple? And I think it has a lot to do with why a lot of people find it so hard to tie something like ministering to the temple. The reason this is so frustrating for me is because I know that there are people out there that go to the temple and then for whatever reason are not able to return for months or years. And it would be inappropriate for them to think that they can't renew their covenants because they can't go to the temple. Likewise, it's equally as incorrect, or maybe even more incorrect, for someone to think that they're keeping their temple covenant by returning to the temple every week, which there's kind of an unwritten, unsaid belief that we hold in the church that it's really frustrating. But that so-and-so goes to the temple every week, they must be doing really well. Good for them. They're we wouldn't use this word, I guess, but they must be so righteous, or they're so blessed, or whatever it is. And we say it for good reason, because the temple is the place to be. Like, it's really cool. It's really fun. You get to make amazing covenants. You're doing amazing work. And it is the safe place from the world. It is the Ark of Noah in our modern day. And I do think that we make it something that it is not, because when I return back to the question of what is the highest form of worship, it's hard to think of anything that we do in the temple as being the highest form of worship because of the covenants that we make. You really can't keep any of the covenants you make in the temple. You can't keep those covenants in the temple. You have to go home to keep the covenants. And I know people that go to the temple a lot, and they're not available when it comes time to minister, And I know people that minister a lot and are not able to go to the temple. And so I start thinking of what it means to be commanded by Jesus for us to love others and to obey his commandments, and how I do think that the highest form of worship is outside the temple. And what we do in the temple empowers us to fully worship. It empowers us to keep covenants. It empowers us to leave the temple and do that which we are commanded to do. But the highest form of worship is what we do outside the temple with our brothers and sisters that are in need. And as I'm thinking about this and I'm preparing a message for sacrament meeting, these stories keep coming to my mind, and it's kind of crazy. I don't know. In my head, it's really crazy because these stories don't go together very well. But for some reason in my mind, they paint a contrast that I think is just so poignant. And that is it's been a week since I've read the stories, so forgive me if some of the details are wrong. But Peter is now the lead apostle. Christ is gone, and Peter's headed to the temple. Peter's on the way to the temple, and a man that's there on the steps, a blind man, cripple, sorry, not blind, says, do you have any money? And Peter stops and says, I don't have any money, but I am an apostle. What I can do is I can heal you. Let's do that. I'm going to heal you, and then you can go in the temple. So he heals him. And that story's a great story. It demonstrates that Peter is now authorized to perform miracles and carry forth the work that Christ has charged him to do. He's going to the temple. That must be a good thing. And so you look at this story and you think, what a great example. And yet you put it next to the story of, say, Christ when he wakes up one morning and he says, okay, guys, we're going to go into town. And the apostles are like, oh, we're going to go to the temple. And he's like, no, we're not going to go to the temple. We're going to go somewhere that is not the temple. We're actually going to go somewhere that's like the opposite of the temple. We're going to go to a pagan temple, if you will. And so he goes to a pagan temple where people are seeking healing in a unauthorized pagan, satanic way, if you want to call it that. And he finds somebody there that has been there a long time who is not real keen on Jesus. Like he doesn't seem to know who Jesus is. But Jesus goes to him anyway. And he doesn't ask Jesus to heal him. Or I guess maybe you could argue he kind of does. And Jesus says, I'm going to heal you anyway. And he heals him. And then he leaves the place, the pool of Bathsheba. And days later, he finds him in the temple. And so you wonder, does Jesus just kind of know everything that's going to happen? And so that was kind of an obvious thing for him to do? Or did he wake up in the morning and did he pray? And did he feel prompted to go to that place not knowing why, not knowing who? Or maybe he heard about this dude. Maybe the guy who hasn't walked, is it 30 years? I can't remember. Can't walk. Maybe he's got a reputation around town and Jesus already know where he's going to be and who he is and everything. But the two stories contrasted to each other stand out to me like a sore thumb of like Christ is not going and doing what people expect him to do and hoping that somebody interrupts him and asks for a ministering blessing. He goes out of his way to find people to minister to, and not, 10 people or 100 people, to find one person to minister to. And, it's fun to think that maybe that person that he healed played a huge role somewhere in the kingdom of God. But maybe he didn't. And then Peter, in contrast, was just kind of doing what he's told, doing what we're all told to do. Like, just go to the temple and just do what you're told. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to try. You're not even expected to get it all right. You don't even have to memorize it if you don't want to. All you have to do is attend. It's like a class, right? You just get credit for attending. All you got to do is attend. You don't have to like say a prayer out loud. You don't have to do anything. They'll tell you what to do, and as long as you just do it, you get credit for attending. And so Peter's like, okay, I'm going to go do my duty. I'm going to go to the temple. And he gets interrupted on his way, and he's like, okay, yeah, for sure, I'll help you out since I'm here, and you happen to be here too, and I happen to be a priesthood holder, and I happen to be able to give you this blessing. Like, since it all worked out, since you made it convenient for me, I'll give you this blessing. And I know it's, I'm being a little cynical, but for some reason, these two stories by comparison just break my heart because of the people that I know that have this same struggle and paradox of worship. If you ask them to give the opening prayer in sacrament meeting, they're ready for it. They'll do it because for whatever reason, that is seen as like fulfilling their covenant duty. But if you ask them to give somebody a ride to church, or if you ask them to bake a plate of cookies for somebody for their birthday, or heaven forbid, have somebody over for dinner, have a family over for dinner, it's impossible. Like they don't see that as part of their responsibility. They see that as the burden rather than the opportunity. They see that as the thing that is just too hard to bear, rather than the one true way that we can participate in the highest form of worship, which is reaching out and loving others. Just kind of boggles my mind. So hopefully I'm communicating that idea clearly. It burdens me, and I want to talk about it in sacrament meeting, because I think that we can all do better, that I can do better, we can all do better, but that as important as the temple is, it is only as important as it empowers us to minister outside the temple. So, taking the Lord's name in vain, like I've learned a lot about what that means to take the Lord's name upon you. When we put on vestments of the Lord's name, and you truly take upon yourself the Lord's name in vain if you go to the temple and then leave the temple and fail to minister to your brothers and sisters. All right. Think about that one. See ya.